In the summer of 1862, President Abraham Lincoln was getting a little desperate. The war seemed to be dragging on interminably, and the politicians and media back home were blaming him for it. If this wasn't bad enough, the defeats in the East were getting far more attention than the victories in the West, so much more so that they overshadowed them.
It seems unreasonable that a series of successes, extending through half a year and clearing more than 1,000 square miles of country, should help us so little, while a single half-defeat should hurt us so much.
He needed a way to win the war quickly. He chose John Pope. From the West, where we have always seen the backs of our enemies, from an army whose business it has been to seek the adversary and to beat him when he was found, whose policy has been attack and not defense. In short, Pope was a man of action, who had no qualms about being aggressive and taking the fight to the enemy. Just what Lincoln needed at the time. However, it seemed that Pope was to be a little too merciless, even for Lincoln's mission. In late July, Pope issued 4 general executive orders. Orders 5, 7, 11, and 13. These orders laid out rules for what Southerners could and couldn't do without earning punishment, and what the Union soldiers could and couldn't do to the Southerners. In short, the Southerners couldn't do a lot, while the Union soldiers could do a lot to them. The most harsh and brutal of Pope's orders was Order Number 11. All Southern civilians who refuse to swear an oath of allegiance to the United States will be turned out of their homes and sent within rebel lines. Anyone caught returning to their home or communicating with anyone inside rebel lines will be shot. Number 13 prevented Southern civilians from requesting protection from the Union soldiers for their homes, which was at the time a common military practice. Pope's soldiers went on a rampage. Soldiers stole beehives, sheep, furniture, cut open couches, smashed mirrors, broke windows, tore doors from their hinges, burned down the citizens' very houses, of course, after removing everything of value and appropriating it for the Union Army. And this wasn't enough for the Union soldiers. Harassment, assault, and fouler crimes put a stain on the banner of the Union as well. It did not sit well at all with Southern forces or General Lee. General Lee went so far as to, in a communication with Stonewall Jackson, order Jackson to not only defeat Pope, but to destroy him. Jefferson Davis took retaliatory action for this as well, against captured Union officers. Should any Southern civilians die by Pope's hand, or under Pope's orders, Jefferson Davis would hang that many captured Union officers in retaliation. The news of Pope's barbarity shocked even the North. McClellan complained to anyone who would listen. Some Union officers refused to follow Pope's orders. The military governor of Fredericksburg even commented that Pope's orders had set Satan loose. The storm of complaints became enough for Pope to soften his tactics a little. He issued 2 general orders. Order number 19, which claimed surprise that Pope's soldiers had so grossly abused his orders, and Order number 107, which put some restrictions on the things Union soldiers could and couldn't do. The campaign, however, was not meant to last. It angered the Southerners enough to fuel their army, and in August, Jackson and Lee had beaten Pope decisively at the Battle of Cedar Mountain, and Lincoln removed him from his command. It was time to find someone with a better idea of how to wage total war. General Sherman. After rounding up an army of almost 100,000, Sherman set out southward in a much more organized version of Pope's conquest. They refrained from killing and the more wanton feats of destruction, but they did make a point of searching most every house they came to for things of use to the army. Livestock, baked goods, and anything else of value to the army was carried off by Union foragers, leaving the Southern citizenry mostly bankrupt and facing hard times ahead. While not merciful by any stretch of the imagination, Sherman's soldiers did not take the time to indulge in the more wanton feats of destruction and cruelty employed by Pope. They mostly burned just military targets and vital resources for the Confederate Army, although a few Southern houses most likely got caught in the blaze and the Union Army made no effort to put them out, and killed only very few civilians, and those not intentionally, and thus the Army made fairly good time across the southern country, reaching Atlanta in 2 months. Our commanding officers are undergoing a great change in regard to the policy of carrying on the war, especially in this department of the Army. Brigadier General John A. Logan stands by and looks on rather approvingly, too, at the boys going for the rails, burning fences, cotton gins, houses, and barns which 3 months ago they would have been court-martialed for. It seems hard to destroy property wantonly or distress women and children, but the people of the South, even the Union people, have permitted this rebellion to come upon them by their own wickedness or imbecility, and they will have to be humbled and made to cry aloud to their rulers to remove the evil they have brought upon them. Leaving Atlanta, Sherman made his way to Savannah, and on the way there he employed much the same tactics as he had on the way to Atlanta. But after leaving Savannah, he entered the Carolinas, mostly South Carolina, and South Carolina being the first state to secede, it incurred greater wrath from the Union Army. It burned everything in their path, whether it was a military barracks or a civilian farmhouse. War differs from other wars in this particular. We are not fighting armies, but a hostile people, and must make old and young, rich and poor feel the hard hand of war. This tactic worked. Many soldiers deserted to go help their families, and Southern morale plummeted.
I feel very blue, sometimes utterly hopeless. The army has walked through Georgia, destroying cities and laying waste to the country. Sherman threatens South Carolina terribly. We have not the men to meet him or check him.
The state of despondency that now prevails among our people is producing a bad effect upon the troops. Desertions are becoming very frequent, and there is good reason to believe that they are occasioned to a considerable extent by letters written to the soldiers from their friends at home. At the end of Sherman's campaign in Georgia alone, the Southerners had lost, by General Sherman's estimate, almost $100 million in property, and around 2,300 troops killed, wounded, or missing. The army, in contrast, had lost only 1,089. Sherman's march through the Carolinas, Sherman's army lost another 3,555, while the Confederates lost 5,734. Even these numbers are probably conservative, because they only take into account the major battles and not minor skirmishes or killed foragers. First time in history, aside from Pope's debacle, that any organized military force had deliberately targeted civilian infrastructure to this degree, since civilian was defined, and it had worked. Lincoln's gamble had paid off. Sherman's tactics of total war served as inspiration for later wars, and featured prominently in World War II, most noticeably in the firebombing of Dresden, the London Blitz, and the nuclear bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. A desperate move by Lincoln, Grant, and Sherman in 1864 turned into a strategy of war that would be remembered for all time, and would change the face of war forever.